We are faced today with radical polarization. We are so divided and everything is so charged up. It seems that people are terrified to go against their groups. The result of this is that people are not thinking for themselves. And we actually have a name for this phenomenon. It's called collective stupidity. And it's where we go along with the group no matter how crazy or ridiculous the idea is. But this doesn't have to be the way that it is. You can think critically for yourself. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 signs that you're actually thinking for yourself. If you like this content, please subscribe. Now, typically it's better to put our heads together, right? 2 heads are better than 1, as they say.
3 heads are better than 2.
But it's not actually always the case. Sometimes when we get into groups, there are some dynamics that make it such that we're not thinking well, that we have this kind of collective stupidity. If we think about a group, right, there's always these shared beliefs, these shared commitments. Now that's all fine and good, but it's a problem when people hold those beliefs just to be part of the group. That's their basis. They don't hold those beliefs because they know them to be true or have good reasons to believe them to be true. It's just they want to be part of the club. They want to be part of the group. They haven't thought for themselves, right? And now what compounds that problem is if the group stigmatizes any questioning of those fundamental commitments. It's just a really bad situation when someone that believes differently is stigmatized as irrational or crazy or even a bad person. We've set the conditions for collective stupidity. And again, that's a big problem. I see this as a big problem in the church when we don't allow people to genuinely ask questions about the basic commitments of Christianity. We've got to let them ask the questions and find their way to the truth. And I think this is a huge problem in politics where we can't even have the debate. We can't even have the discussion without being stigmatized or labeled or insulted. Right? We don't allow people to think for themselves. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor in Nazi Germany and part of the resistance against Hitler, he says it this way. He says, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than wickedness." Now, Bonhoeffer was, of course, very concerned with wickedness and evil. In fact, he had a frontline view of evil and wickedness as a pastor in Nazi Germany. But, right, what he's saying here is that there's always, in a mass movement of evil, there's always going to be the evil actors. But the masses kind of come along not because they're all just evil, it's because they're stupid. To use that language, right? They haven't thought critically about these things. They've just accepted them. They're not thinking for themselves, and they get swept up in the evil movement. We're always going to have evil people, but this results in something like Nazi Germany when you have a whole group of people that just kind of get swept up into it and aren't thinking for themselves. Okay, so we've got to think for ourselves. Here are 5 signs that you actually do think for yourself. Sign number 1 is that you don't get your information passively. Now, if you're someone that gets your information through social media, here's the problem, is that info is being curated, right? It's being curated by an algorithm. And that algorithm is highly tuned, finely tuned to give you what you want. And this is honestly how a lot of people get their information, is just from their social media feeds. But here's the problem. The algorithm is feeding you things that it thinks you will click on, right? So its only goal is to keep your attention. And so it's going to give you what you want. It's going to flatter your biases. But if you're going to think for yourself, you're going to have to actively choose your sources of information. Don't let the algorithm deliver to you the information of the day. And I would highly recommend that you look to long-form sources, articles and books, and maybe like a lengthy interview The problem is that most of these issues that we face today, especially politically, are going to be these very complicated issues. And a soundbite just will not be able to really plumb the depths of those or do justice to the depth of these issues. All a soundbite's going to be able to do is just sort of shape your emotions a little bit. And again, that's really just not thinking for yourself. But they'll sure make you feel justified. They will give you that emotional push on these things. But again, that's what we need to resist in order to think rationally for ourselves. Okay, sign number 2 is that you can articulate a steel man version of the opposing view. One of the clearest signs of collective stupidity is when all we can offer for the other side is a caricature of their view. But if you actually think for yourself, then you can articulate a steel man version of it. If you think about the distinction between a straw man and a steel man, it's something like this. The straw man is a caricature that's easily defeated, right? And this happens all the time in politics, all the time in theology and debates and so on, is where people will really kind of mock or ridicule the other view rather than giving a plausible version of it as they critique it. Whereas to steel man a view is to give a version of the view that though they actually hold to, that they would say that that's a fair version of it, and then you critique that. The goal here is intellectual charity, where you're giving the view a fair hearing. If you think for yourself, you're going to be charitable to that view. You're going to say, here's the strongest version of it, and here are the problems. Sign number 3 is that you can have thoughtful conversations with people with whom you disagree. A sign of someone who doesn't think for themselves is someone who shuts down conversation the moment they get pushed on their view. I think we all need people in our lives that disagree with us, that we're in conversation with, right? And hopefully these are long conversations. They're ongoing conversations where you come back to it time and time again. We tend to surround ourselves with people who agree. And I think that's important too. I think you need to have people with whom you can kind of lock arms with and be like-minded with. That's all well and good. But I think you also just need to have those people in your life that push you too, that disagree with you. And again, that you can learn from to understand the view that you oppose. And sign number 4 that you think for yourself is that you can say, I don't know. I think that collective stupidity is often fueled by a kind of presumed certainty and a kind of overconfidence. But anybody that thinks for themselves knows that these are really complex issues and these are big issues, and that we're just in process. There's going to be times in which we're comfortable just saying, I don't know. I think it's really refreshing when you hear somebody just say, you know what, I'm still thinking about that, or I'm just in process on that issue, or I just really don't know. I'm really torn. Because it just shows that they really are thinking about it. I mean, that's just what this is, to think for yourself. But it's so countercultural, right? Because the culture is a culture of outrage and certainty, which I think is a false sense of certainty. We should be willing and ready to say, I don't know. I don't have it all figured out. And sign number 5 is that your beliefs have changed, right? It's got to be the case that over time, as you've been in process, as you've thought about these things, you can point to a variety of places in which you've changed your mind. It just shows that you are thinking for yourself, that you're trying to get closer and closer to the truth and be even more rational about the beliefs that you have. But if you've never changed your mind on anything, that's not necessarily a good thing and might suggest that you've just kind of gone along with your group and that you're not thinking for yourself. Now, I'm not saying that when we find truth, we shouldn't grab hold of it and believe it and stick with it. I think there's a virtue of being steadfast in what we know to be true. It's just to say that if we've never changed our mind, then it's at least a concern that we've not really thought for ourselves. Now, I think thinking for yourself will cost you, right? Because you're going to disagree with people, right? There's going to be groups that have stigmatized the belief that you now hold. And that can be really difficult. You may bear the brunt of collective stupidity. But there's such a value here. There's such a value. Listen, you now think for yourself. You are rational in your belief, right? You are aiming at truth. And I think when we do that, we find ourselves confident, and we can have courage in the face of what might be ridicule or insults or labels, right? That sort of intellectual and moral courage in the face of opposition. It's a beautiful thing. And as the greatest philosopher of all time has said, the truth will indeed set you free.